is also full of chapters. In fact, I would say that successful books and successful life leans into several chapters ahead, not just the next chapter. One should almost know the end note before you even begin the book, so that the chapters speak to each other.
Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Flex Executive Code. And I have a fantastic speaker, friend, and someone I admire immensely, Chandra, with us today. And very relevant to our topic today. So, we are talking about leaning into the next chapter. And if we talk about that, when I look at Chandra's career, having worked as CHRO for big names, including IBM, Dr. Reddy's, and many others, and then moving into something that we all dream about doing, which is teaching. So, today, what we are going to do is spend some time with Chandra, not only trying to understand his own journey, but also getting some tips from him in terms of what could executives do when they are thinking about their next chapter. What are some of the roadblocks or barriers that they should watch out for? And I know, Chandra, you also teach a very unique subject in your institute. And I think if you could give some nuggets from there also for the people who are looking for some direction, that will be wonderful. So, with that, Chandra, welcome to the show. And thank you so much for accepting to be on this show. And I look forward to talking to you.
Thank you, Karunesh. Very kind words. Yeah, I'm happy to share and chat with you. I equally admire your insights and the work you are doing. In fact, you are ushering in the future that I talked about in my book, which is the future of fractional jobs, and the fact that jobs would not be these management trained to chairman type of a career, long careers. This is something that you are already operationalizing and making it real. So it's fantastic to talk to someone who is already into the future. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So, very inspiring journey of your own. And then with this book and the topics that you teach there, maybe we can start with a little bit of your journey, your own journey, Chandra. Of course, I mentioned a few things, but there's certainly much more. So, why don't we hear your journey first and then we jump into the other things?
Well, my journey was like a lot of middle class Indians, began rural India, very circumscribed circumstances, thatched roofs and mud walls for school, no English medium education, lots of movement, lots of desire to be there, but be not have the circumstance, the level playing field. So I'm one of those classic stories of the Indian growth and how the growth of the country, the growth of the economy, the aspirations all have shaped us. So I like, you have somewhere used the word leaning into the next chapter. I like that expression a lot because now I relate to it more like an author of a book, because a book is all a set of chapters. Life is also full of chapters. In fact, I would say that successful books and successful life leans into several chapters ahead, not just the next chapter. One should almost know the end note before you even begin the book, so that the chapters speak to each other. When the reader reads it, he is led through. The life goes through a pattern, a predictable, somewhat suspenseful, but somewhat leading one to the other type of a life. And so, both my from authorship and looking back at my life, I think we need to play it at the intersection of serendipity and intentionality.
What I like about this is that, as you mentioned rightly, that it's not necessarily planned. There's a bit of a suspense of what may happen. There's some excitement of what, but still it needs to be intentional to take it in certain direction, which is awesome. I mean, I wish a lot of people could actually think through that. But coming to this topic of, I know that you are looking at the next chapter. We know that with the way we live our life today, there's nothing called retirement as such. There's only a next chapter again, because you are
Exactly.
moving from one to the next chapter. And retirement may be for a certain type of role in the way we look at our appointment and contracts and so on. What I'm thinking about, and as you were talking about your journey, it almost sounds like you were much more proactive in the way you planned it out. But we also know, Chandra, that we have a lot of people who get a surprise, a shock, particularly when they are doing very well or looks like they're doing very well. They are quite comfortable in their respective job or role, in a multinational or in a corporate job, and suddenly they get a surprise that, oh my god, we have a restructuring happened, some life event of some kind which surprises people. So my question to you, Chandra, is that when there are people who are not planning anything yet, still looks like from your conversation that they should be working on few things and planning irrespective. Throw some light on that for people and our listeners, that what could they do even if they are comfortable and they're in a full-time role doing very well.
Yeah, yeah. Now your question contains the answer, but let me tell you from my experience that those you are calling it nicely surprise. Actually, they are shocks, and
Yeah.
when they happen, it's very shocking that the rug is pulled under your leg just suddenly. Layoffs, restructuring, lack of alignment based separations, unexpected tensions with bosses and companies. Lots of things can happen. Believe me, some of them happened to me too. One thing that helped me, and I would recommend everyone to do that, is that, this, I love this, in our childhood, when I was about 7, 10 years old, I used to be asked to write an essay called If You Were a Prime Minister. And I was finding that funny as to why should somebody at the age of 10 be asked a question, write an essay on if you were a prime minister. Now, when I reflect on it, I thought it was a very powerful one. It sort of lets you know that don't hold your ambition back. Don't think that something big will not happen to you. But think whether, if that big thing happens, are you prepared? This is an interesting way of living life. To say, I will prepare for the next chapter when I get there. Cross the bridge when you come to it. One of the classic wisdoms. I don't think that's the only right thing to do. I think it's important to anticipate the bridge before it comes. I think it's important to think that anything can happen. I think we should be constantly on the mode of preparing for the backups and for the future. So coming back to your question, a couple of things that people will do well if they kind of focused on this. One is don't give up your ambition. If you want to be a CEO, write early when you're only a manager. You should write an essay, what will I do differently if I was a CEO?
Right.
And what kind of company I'll be a CEO, what kind of domain area I'll be a CEO, what kind of impact I will make, what kind of difference I will do. Therefore, what competencies do I need? What skill sets do I need? What networks do I need? Where do I work on? And how do I keep myself prepared if that luck comes knocking at my door? Am I ready to open it? The door. So that is the way I actually have practiced it. So I'm actually often think of, like for example, I told you I already am thinking of my next chapter.
Yeah.
So it is not a headline for me. It is very specific. I have organizations in mind, positions in mind. I may not get them. I may not get them, but I have clear understanding of what kind of roles will interest me next. And then I go and study those job descriptions. I study the people who are holding those jobs now. I study what are they impacting and not impacting. If that employer again hired me instead of them, what will he or she expect from me? All this rehearsal happens even before I even approach any of them. So life is a perpetual rehearsal for the next scene of the drama. It
So
has to be that.
wonderful, very well articulated. And I like this thing of what if I was the CEO, or what if I was the prime minister. And I'll tell you, I keep running those training sessions with companies. And one of my favorite way of getting people to articulate their own frustration or point of view is exactly asking the question that what if you were made the CEO for 1 week.
Yeah,
It tells a lot. But
yeah,
it's, of course, from the organization culture point of view, what you're talking about is personal aspiration, but it's the same thing. It's a very powerful exercise to do.
absolutely, absolutely.
I want to shift gears a little bit from an individual going through this journey. I also find, Chandra, that while we are seeing the emergence of portfolio career, fractional work in a very big way, I'm still not sure that how well the companies are adapting that, and how are they getting equipped to be able to do it well. I would love to hear your point of view on how people are doing it. What guidance are you providing to companies who are thinking about leveraging the mix of talent in a different way?
Before a desirable action becomes a feasible operational reality, there is always a latency. So we must be prepared that companies won't embrace this uncertain new development, which is a real imperative. of the new labor market. We must understand that the two parts of this must meet and deeply meet. Employers must realize that the old ecosystem of employment, what I call full-time employees seeking a career with you, is both costly and unaffordable and unsustainable for the reason that organizations are disrupted. Work methods have to be more agile than career based hierarchies, and organizations, in order to survive into the future, must have a more agile, more flexible workforce which is fluid. And it is a strategic imperative, not an experiment in HR practice. That's the conviction that employers must understand. Then they will embrace it like a necessity and not like a fashionable thing to do. On the other hand, employees must know that deep down their own preferences are changing. They have been waiting for a time when they can also adopt a flexible life, a gig lifestyle, freelance their way through different assignments, and fulfill their full potential through a portfolio instead of getting stuck in one job and trade off, one's own growth in the name of staying subservient and loyal to a company. I think both the trends are in their incipient and very, very early stages. So, therefore, to get too many use cases for this is not so easy. But it takes time. I'm very hopeful. These are mega trends. These are trends that take time to come through, but they will. There are a number of forces in our developments in the world which will almost accelerate the adoption of this fractional work. Obviously, organization designs completely reimagined due to technologies like half of the work being done by AI agents will force you to rethink and reimagine your organization and must make you think that careers are not what they used to be, and therefore you will not have those kind of employment patterns. Companies will do well to choose new models of work, new models of employment to be able to tap into talent, which is what I argue in my book, that if you only opened up, in fact, my one of the kind of punchlines of my book is the way we work determines how many of us can work.
Oh
And
my
let me
God.
explain that. The way we work today is very constraining. It assumes that everybody should show up in a place called office at 9 o'clock and kind of somehow plot their way through till 7 o'clock and commute their way back for an hour in company provided shuttles or even worse still in metros, and then spend 14, 18 hours at work and usually be male and English speaking and live in one of the ghettos of a big city. This is almost the character, if you look, a persona of an employee. Now you just contrast that is where talent lies. Talent doesn't lie only in the big city. They lie in India, at least they lie in the tier 3, tier 4. There are 5 tiers of India. They are not all English speaking. They all don't want to migrate to the big city. In fact, if they migrate to big city, then what happened to Bangalore will happen to all cities. And it is not their interest or anybody's. They don't want to commute. They want to have the flexibility, and we want to reach them because the talent is there. So there is huge amount of mutual advantage to adopt a wholly different approach to where talent is and how jobs must go to people instead of people coming to jobs. Yeah. And that those are changes which are possible if we embrace technology that it allows this, immersive technology. Look at where you are and how we are talking. Would it have been any different if you traveled all the way to Hyderabad and we sat in a physical room? I don't think it would have been any different. So the point I'm making is that yet we do not have too many because this conviction, this data evidence of how the things will work well, etc., is not settled down yet, and there is always an inertia. Organizations are continuing to be organized the way they were organized in the industrial era, but there are green shoots. So, for example, take Unilever. I teach a case of Unilever preparing itself for the future. It was done 10 years ago. And they reimagined their work plans and models. So they introduced something called the U work plan, where they said you can be on a thin kind of an retainer with us, but we will, whenever we call you, you should show up. And what an idea that is to sort of, in some way, continue change together. So fluid workforce, contingent workforce, changing the whole ecosystem of workforce is engaging the attention of progressive companies on the one side, and is also engaging the desire and demand of a lot of Gen Z and new people who seek greater balance between life and work. So this is a trend. This is the writing on the wall. but we should not wait for the next big hoarding. We should allow it to grow organically, and it will grow.
I love the way you articulated this, Chandra, again, and your point about the different tiers of cities, and instead of people going to the job must come to them. In a very strong way, I think the technology has facilitated that quite well. I mean, I'm sure that we are using the same thing. I have my team spread in different geographical areas, and we are able to work together. There are things that keeps binding us, but certainly it's possible to do that. And I see organizations who are evolved, and we also work with Unilever, and we saw that how a large organization like that has been able to actually create that ecosystem which can accommodate people working with very different type of style, and therefore being able to use fractional retainers, uh, you know uh, people on gig. I would love to hear about your book a little bit more. This is a topic where I'm seeing a lot of executives who are in full-time job. They are not yet disrupted in a way. The transition period can be sometimes very difficult and painful, emotionally very disturbing. And every time that happens, we know that what phase the person is going through. But I would love to hear from your book's point of view also some guidance for people who are going through that journey. What would you suggest?
No, thank you. Thank you. My book was written last year, published in August of 24. And it took me about 18 months to write that up and another 2, 3 years to research for it. I actually began the research during the pandemic, in the early days of the pandemic, because I almost saw from the early days of pandemic that this is not a disease or an epidemic. It's a life-altering seismic shift. Some of these changes we do not fully perceive, but they happen. What's my book about? My book is called Shaping the Future of Work. It's a subtitle, Building Flexible Organizations and Unleashing the Human Potential of Bharat. That's the title of the book. So, as the name suggests, there are 4, 5 big messages there. It's published by Penguin Random House, available on all normal sources of Amazon, etc. What the book argues is that the narrative of the future of work is largely led from the West because all the innovations and all the developments around future of work is happening there, and the society there is engaged with what will happen to AI, etc. But that narrative, if it is blindly repeated in all countries, it has severe implications. So, come to very quickly, for example, driverless car is a fantastic thing to have. It's a great innovation. But would I like to have driverless taxis in Mumbai? Probably not. Not because it can't be achieved, but because it'll take away a few million jobs. And am I as a society better off with that? I'm not sure. But would I have a driverless car to go into a difficult mine area where some detonators are working and we don't want human beings to get it? I do want them to use those cars in Kargil for war, of course, yes. So I'm not against technology. In my book, I argue that technology comes with a range of possibilities.
Right.
Countries, societies, economies, firms must make more conscious, deliberate, discriminate adoption of technology that is contextual, relevant, and important for them to adopt, and not join a bandwagon. And we shouldn't be using ChatGPT because some techno capitalist behind that just wants us to do it more to make a $1 trillion company. We should be using it if we really get productivity. Technology should be augmenting human productivity, but not eliminating human jobs. That's my one of the big arguments of that book. For that, we need to take a view called we will shape the future and not suffer it, which is actually almost the philosophy with which I have led my life. So it comes very naturally for me to say we all are faced with a future. Many of us simply suffer it. I would rather shape it. So for that, you need to have a vision. You need to have a clarity of what you want to do with the future. So I play this book at the firm level, but also at the national level. At the firm level, I say if you build flexible organizations, you kind of don't think that work from home is some kind of an unnecessary privilege to some people, but a business imperative to tap talent from various towns and actually use it as an additional way of bringing in new ways of working, combining freedom, autonomy, flexibility and productivity. There is enough research to say that actually things don't go too bad if you had work from home or anything. Do go look up the research. So how do you build? And flexibility is not just work from home. It's actually a whole management philosophy which says that I can't micromanage my employees and I should not. That I actually trust them to decide what they want to do. And when they do function under freedom and autonomy and discretion and direction of their own, they actually perform better than when everything is told to them in. So flexibility is again a conscious management philosophy to enhance human potential and human productivity. So I argue that. Then I'd argue a lot of things, including how the country should actually adopt work from home as a national strategy for creating inclusive employment. I also talk about a lot of firm practices that how employment models have to be revisited, like we discussed, how we don't have to have this full time career always, how various things can be done. So, when I talk about them in certain chapters, many chapters are actually my, let's say, my wish, my research based findings, and my arguments for a future that we can actually shape and unfold for ourselves. But in a few places, to supplement what I say, how might people live under that new world? So, take for example, so future of work, again, the most classic example. One of the future of work is clearly, I mean, 30% of the work is already on a hybrid way. In spite of all the headlines that companies are coming back, etc., fact is there is already a settled way of working nowadays from remote homes, etc. Now, but do we know how to work? The most important thing to understand is that the structure of work has changed, but the management of work has not changed. We
Yes.
still manage our workplaces the same way we manage the industrial era workplaces. So we need to think about that. So I provide, say, take for example, one practical clue. If you are engaging with your employees fully remotely, you must have far more intentional, inclusive strategies. Because the ease with which you can be inclusive just by saying hi to somebody on the corridor near the water cooler will not be easily possible if everybody is on a Zoom call. So, what do you need to do? You need to schedule serendipity. You need to plan interactions that are personal and spontaneous. And you have to work hard to make non work related relationship based agenda as most same cadence as work reviews are. If you do that, then you can make the best use of the new technology. In fact, if any, it will be more and more immersive. I am a big believer, optimistic believer of the power of technology to bridge distances and to create an extremely immersive and interactive workplace, provided managers tend to leverage it and change their work practices. So, one of the places where I teach it, I call it all these years we were built on a belief called out of sight, out of mind. The new slogan should be out of sight, always in mind. Now, these are small shifts. What does it mean to work with AI agents as opposed to human beings? We need to think about it, not the what of it, but the how of it.
Yes. Wow. Wow. This is amazing. I love the way you frame this again because many of these things we kind of take it for granted. But these are the components, small components, which form the ecosystem for people as well as the organization to be able to work. And I love the way you also said about the fact that future you have to shape the future instead of suffering it. I think that's a very important part, and the amount of ambiguity that we are dealing with today, the only thing you can do is to prepare yourself for much more surprise, ambiguous situation, and the agility to be able to deal with that. So learning and continuous learning will remain the biggest currency for people to be able to move forward.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely right.
Chandra, thank you so much for joining us and spending the time. This has been so good and so many things you shared. But any closing comments on the again the
Well,
topic that we have leading into the new next chapter?
yeah, there's so many ways to do that, but just because the next chapter, the next future is not known or is likely to be alarmingly disruptive, I think the best people prepare for it. Don't lose hope. The surprise of the future is enticing and seductive.
Yep.
It should cause in us the urge to deal with it, master it, instead of surrender and resign to it. And that's true for life, that's true for the societies, that's true for countries. So we should be living always in the future, even as we handle the present. That's
Wow.
how I kind of look at life, look at my work, look at what I'm doing. Yeah. So I thought I'll leave that thought with you, whatever worth it is. How do you prevent from being going old? Is not to kind of keep on saying, oh, everything was great in my time, but to say everything will be great next time.
Right.
Because the truth is, they will be great. The truth is, my grandson is smarter than me. It is a fact. Why can't I recognize that interesting new smartness and hang on to some past and be romanticizing it and saying that was always the best time? I don't live in the past. I don't.
Awesome. Oh my God, this is so good. Thank you so much, Chandra. Really appreciate the time. Really appreciate the all the contribution to this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karunesh.